I am a man who builds, not with steel and stone, but with data, projections, and meticulously crafted systems. My name is Arthur, and at 38, I've spent my life eliminating risk, predicting the market, and ensuring my world runs with the cold, precise logic of a well-oiled machine. My home, an immaculate apartment in a high-rise, is a testament to this philosophy. Every item has its place, every schedule is rigid, and my life is a masterpiece of calculated order. This is the life I built. 5 years ago, Clara became a part of that structure. She was 29 then, a vibrant marketing coordinator, and I saw in her a potential for perfect symmetry. She quit her job 2 years into our marriage. I called it a sign of my success. My income was more than sufficient to support us both comfortably, and it allowed her to focus on being Clara. She loosely managed the household, attended her yoga classes, met friends for lunch, and spent my money with an enthusiasm that I once found endearing. Now it just felt transactional. I worked 70-hour weeks, came home to takeout she'd reheated, and slept beside a wife who scrolled through her phone until midnight. We had no children, a mutual decision made early on, though lately, a hollow space in our home made me wonder if it had been a mistake. There was no screaming, no obvious conflict, just a slow, silent erosion of connection that neither of us had the courage to acknowledge. Lately, though, the silence had been replaced by a subtle hum of paranoia. I noticed the changes. She'd angle her phone away whenever I entered the room, her thumb hovering over the screen. She started wearing a new perfume, an exotic scent I didn't recognize, just to run errands. She'd laugh at texts she wouldn't share, a secretive private joy that had nothing to do with me. The paranoia grew until it was a living thing in my chest. When I suggested we needed to reconnect, to remember why we'd chosen each other, she agreed with an almost frightening eagerness. It both relieved and unsettled me, and so I planned the perfect solution. A week at a remote cabin in the Cascade Mountains, 4 hours from the city. The place was surrounded by dense forest, accessible only by a narrow dirt road with no cell service, no distractions, just us, the raw wilderness, and the quiet opportunity to rebuild. I booked it for late October, when the autumn colors would be at their peak, and the tourist season would be a distant memory. As we drove, Clara was unusually animated, her phone a constant presence in her hands until the signal died. I told myself it was just social media withdrawal. The cabin was perfect, rustic but comfortable, with a stone fireplace and windows overlooking a pristine lake. The first 2 days passed in a strange, polite silence. We hiked, we cooked together, we sat by the fire talking about nothing. I told myself this was progress, that we were simply readjusting to each other's presence, like two strangers finding their footing. But that night, as I watched her finally drift off to sleep, the light from the dying embers cast a long shadow across her face, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just adjusting to me. She was adjusting to the absence of someone else. I just didn't know who. The morning of the third day arrived with a false sense of peace, a deceptive warmth that had no business being here in late October. I woke early, the primal urge to provide for my wife pulsing through my veins. It was a foolish, romantic notion, I know, but I was desperate for something to feel real again. I checked my hunting rifle, loaded my pack with supplies, and returned to the bedroom. Clara was still in bed, the sheets pulled up to her chin, despite the late hour. "I have a terrible headache," she whispered when I suggested she join me. "Probably the altitude change. I just need to rest in the dark." She insisted I go alone, practically pushing me out the door with a desperate look in her eyes and assurances that she'd be fine. As I headed out, my mind, ever the analytical machine, began to flag inconsistencies. She said she was resting, but I'd seen her sitting up, scrolling through her phone, the very device that was supposedly useless here. She complained of a headache, yet her makeup was perfectly applied, her lips a soft, rose-colored stain. Most jarringly, she was wearing the expensive silk robe I had bought her for our anniversary. The one she had claimed was too nice for everyday wear. When I'd leaned in to kiss her forehead, she had flinched slightly, turning her face away as if the touch was a foreign thing. I tried to dismiss it all. I wanted this trip to work. I needed it to work. So I shouldered my rifle and headed into the forest, following a winding trail that led deeper into the woods. The morning was beautiful, a kaleidoscope of red and gold leaves, the silence broken only by birdsong and the satisfying crunch of my boots on the forest floor. For the first time in months, I felt present, alive, connected to something beyond spreadsheets and conference calls. I spotted rabbit tracks and followed them to a small clearing. I moved carefully, silently, my hunter's focus razor-sharp. But my boot hit a patch of wet leaves covering a moss-slicked rock. My feet went out from under me, and I crashed down hard, my full weight coming down on my left leg at an unnatural angle. The pain was immediate and searing, a hot white fire that shot up my leg. I tried to stand, but my ankle buckled, a sickening crunch echoing in the sudden silence. It was a bad sprain, maybe a fracture. I could barely put any weight on it. I sat there for a long moment, cursing my carelessness, calculating the impossible distance back to the cabin. The hunt was over. I used a fallen branch as a makeshift crutch and began the agonizing journey back, each step a fresh wave of agony. My mind, ever pragmatic, shifted to practical concerns. Ice, elevation, a hospital trip. The journey took nearly an hour, each minute stretching into an eternity. I was exhausted, in pain, and utterly defeated. The vision of my hunting fantasy lay shattered at my feet. As I finally approached the cabin, leaning heavily on my crutch, I heard something that stopped me cold. It was a low, rhythmic sound, a moan of pleasure, followed by a man's low, guttural laugh. It was a sound that had no business in a silent cabin where my wife was supposedly resting with a headache. I stood frozen at the window, my injured leg forgotten, the pain nothing but a distant hum. My entire reality, the controlled, precise world I had built, was collapsing into the scene before me. There she was. Clara, in our bed, the bed I'd slept in the night before, the bed I'd booked to save our marriage, with a man I'd never seen before. They weren't hiding. There was no shame, no furtiveness. They were utterly consumed by each other, a raw, primal tableau of passion that I hadn't experienced with my wife in years, maybe ever. He was younger than me, probably in his early 30s, with a lean, strong build. His clothes were in a careless pile by the bed, work boots, worn jeans, a flannel shirt. Clara's silk robe, the one she'd deemed too nice for everyday wear, was pooled on the floor like a discarded skin. Her fingers were tangled in the stranger's hair, her back arched, her face a mask of raw pleasure. It was a face I didn't know, a face expressing an intensity I had never in 5 years of marriage managed to evoke. The shock lasted perhaps 5 seconds. Then came the rage, pure, primal, absolute. It wasn't the contained anger of a professional man whose wife had committed an abstract betrayal. It was older, more fundamental. A violation so complete it bypassed rational thought entirely. Every calculation, every plan, every shred of control I'd ever possessed threatened to shatter. But I am, above all else, a man of control. And even in my rage, my mind, my cold, precise mind, began to work. I didn't storm inside. I retreated silently, limping back to my truck. My thoughts moved with a mechanical efficiency I had only ever reserved for multi-million-dollar deals. I retrieved my hunting rifle, checked the ammunition, and considered my options with the same clinical detachment I applied to financial models. I could confront them, demand an explanation, humiliate her, throw the man out, file for divorce, and take satisfaction in the legal and financial ruin I could engineer, or I could solve the problem completely. The thought arrived fully formed, without preamble. It was monstrous. It was irreversible. But in this moment, with the image of Clara's betrayal burned into my brain, it felt inevitable, necessary. The only action that matched the magnitude of the violation. This man, this Mark, I now knew his name was from the low whispers and gasps I'd overheard from the window, had invaded my space. He had corrupted my wife, destroyed the order of my life. Clara had broken the fundamental contract of our marriage, had made a fool of me, and had the stunning audacity to bring her lover to the very place I had chosen to save our failing marriage. The level of calculation, of contempt, required to orchestrate such a deception was, in my mind, unforgivable. I thought about the location, miles from civilization, no cell service, no witnesses. My injury, my legitimate pain, provided a partial alibi already. The isolation that was supposed to heal our marriage now offered something else entirely: opportunity. I limped back toward the cabin, rifle in hand, my decision made. My leg throbbed with each step, but the pain felt distant, unimportant. My breathing was steady. My hands, which had been shaking with rage just moments ago, were perfectly calm. This is what separates me from other men, I thought. The ability to act decisively when action is required, to eliminate variables that threaten the integrity of the system. I reached the door. Inside, the rhythmic moans and murmurs continued. Clara and her lover completely unaware that her husband had returned early, that their secret had been discovered, and that everything was about to change. The door slammed open with enough force to crack against the interior wall, the sound a punctuation mark on the end of my marriage. Clara's scream died in her throat, a choked sob as she saw me framed in the doorway. My face, I knew, was eerily calm, the rifle aimed steadily at the bed. The man, Mark, scrambled backward, tangled in the sheets, his hands raised in that universal gesture of surrender. "Please," he began, his voice cracking. "Please, man, just let me explain. I didn't want explanations. I didn't want pleas or justifications or the messy humanity of the people who had just destroyed my carefully ordered world. I wanted the problem solved, eliminated, removed from the equation with the same cold efficiency I bring to every other aspect of my life." The first shot hit Mark in the chest, cutting off his words mid-sentence. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, followed by Clara's raw, animal scream. She was trying to scramble off the bed, reaching for something, clothes, a phone, some imagined escape, when my second shot found her. The scream stopped. The cabin fell silent except for the ringing in my ears. I stood there for a long moment, the rifle still raised, my mind already several steps ahead. The rage had burned away, leaving something colder and more functional in its wake. I had just committed an act that could not be undone, taken a step that had permanently severed me from the life I knew. There was no going back. There was only forward, and forward required meticulous planning. I methodically searched the cabin. I found Mark's truck keys in his jeans pocket, along with a phone showing a dozen text exchanges with Clara, mapping out their rendezvous. "Can't wait until you get here, baby," one read. "He's such a boring old man, he'll never know," another said. Evidence. I photographed the texts on my own phone before pocketing his device. I found Clara's phone hidden in her makeup bag, unlocked, revealing months of messages, planning, scheming, explicit photos, and mocking references to her boring husband and his useless little cabin trip. More evidence, more justification, though I no longer needed it. The decision had been made and executed. The bodies must disappear. I had studied the maps obsessively before booking the cabin, noting every trail, road, and water source. 3 miles west, accessible via an old logging road, there was a deep lake locals called Drowned Man's Pool for the 2 hikers who had vanished there decades ago. It was surrounded by dense forest, rarely visited, the bottom obscured by decades of silt and debris. Working with grim efficiency, I wrapped the bodies in the cabin's sheets and dragged them, one at a time, to Mark's truck parked behind the cabin. Clara must have told him where to hide it. My injured leg screamed in protest, but adrenaline provided a temporary override. I loaded both bodies into the truck bed, covering them with a tarp I found in his vehicle. The drive to the lake was slow and nerve-wracking. Every bump in the dirt road felt like potential discovery, though I knew rationally that we were miles from any other human being. At the lake, I drove the truck to the water's edge, shifted it into neutral, and released the parking brake. The truck rolled forward, slowly at first, then faster, splashing into the dark water. I watched as it sank, bubbles rising, until it disappeared entirely beneath the surface. The walk back to the cabin, limping on my injured leg, took over an hour. The forest, once a place of serenity, was now a silent accomplice to my crime. I stood in the doorway of the cabin, the scene of the crime before me. The air was thick with the scent of cordite and copper. Blood spatter stained the walls and the bedding. Shell casings lay like fallen soldiers on the floor. Disrupted furniture and a misplaced lamp told a story of a struggle. The scene was an obvious crime, but it was a story that would never be told if I did my job correctly. My mind, ever the analytical machine, began to assess the task. It was just a problem to be solved, a variable to be eliminated from my perfectly curated life. I began with documentation, not to preserve evidence, but to ensure I missed nothing in the cleanup. I used my phone to photograph everything from multiple angles. Then I stripped the bed completely, bundling every piece of fabric that might contain blood or DNA, sheets, pillowcases, blankets, even the mattress cover. These went into heavy-duty garbage bags I found under the kitchen sink. The mattress itself showed blood seepage. I flipped it, then with great effort I dragged it outside to the fire pit, along with all the fabric. I doused everything in lighter fluid and set it ablaze, watching as the flames consumed the evidence, turning the memories of their betrayal into ash. While the fire raged, I returned inside to begin the painstaking process of cleaning. I started with the obvious blood spatter, using bleach and hot water, scrubbing the walls, floor, and furniture until the stains were gone. I found 3 shell casings and pocketed them. I located a bullet embedded in the wall behind the bed and dug it out with a kitchen knife, patching the hole with toothpaste, a temporary fix that blended reasonably well with the aged wood. Hours passed. The sun tracked across the sky, but I paid it no mind. My injured leg throbbed, but I ignored the pain, focusing only on the task at hand. I cleaned not just the bedroom, but the entire cabin, eliminating any potential forensic evidence. I wiped down surfaces Mark might have touched. I vacuumed thoroughly, then burned the vacuum bag in the fire. I even scrubbed the bathroom, knowing Clara had likely showered with her lover, leaving DNA evidence everywhere. The fire outside eventually reduced the bedding to ash, which I scattered into the lake, a final resting place for their secrets. I cleaned the fire pit itself, then built a new, innocent fire using fresh wood, letting it burn naturally to establish the appearance of normal vacation activities. By the time the sun began to set, the cabin was cleaner than when we'd arrived. I stood in the middle of the main room, mentally reviewing my work. What evidence remained? My own presence, certainly, my fingerprints, my DNA, my possessions, but that's expected. I was supposed to be here. Clara's presence was expected, too. But Mark's presence had been erased. The violence had been erased. The cabin had been restored to its original state, a quiet, rustic retreat where nothing unusual had happened. My story was simple. It was believable. It was mostly true. The kind of story that, without a body or evidence of violence, would be impossible to disprove. I'd go over the details again and again, rehearsing my performance for the authorities. The story would go like this. Clara and I went to bed last night. This morning I went hunting alone. Clara wanted to rest. I injured my leg, true, and returned early, true. Clara was gone, true in a sense. Her phone was gone, true, currently sinking in a lake. I searched the immediate area, calling for her, growing increasingly panicked. Eventually, with no sign of her and my leg too injured to search effectively, I called for help. I was the heartbroken husband, the victim of a mysterious disappearance, the architect of my own flawless alibi. The sheriff's department arrived 90 minutes after my call. 2 deputies in a mud-spattered SUV, followed an hour later by Sheriff Hutchins, a weathered man in his 60s who'd seen everything the mountains could throw at hikers and tourists. They found me sitting on the cabin's porch, my injured leg elevated, my face a mask of controlled anguish. My heart was a steady drum, and my mind was on a timer, rehearsing every beat of the performance. I walked them through my story, my voice steady but strained in exactly the right way. I showed them the hunting rifle, unloaded and stored properly. I showed them where I fell, where I had injured my leg. I explained Clara's headache, her desire to rest, my decision to return early due to the injury. The deputies examined the cabin, pristine, showing no signs of disturbance. They searched the immediate area, calling Clara's name into the darkening forest, their voices echoing off the trees. Had there been any arguments? Was Clara depressed? Did she have any reason to leave? Sheriff Hutchins asked. I provided careful answers. Our marriage was good, I told him. We'd come here to reconnect. Clara had seemed happy, just tired. I mentioned no concerns, no red flags. I was the perfect picture of a devoted husband whose wife had inexplicably vanished. Over the following days, the search expanded. Volunteers arrived from nearby towns. Dogs tracked scents to the lake but found nothing. Divers searched the shallows, missing the deep water where Mark's truck had settled into the silt. Helicopters surveyed from above. I participated in the search despite my injury, calling Clara's name alongside strangers, my face etched with appropriate worry. My grief was real, just not for the reasons they thought. Detectives from the state police arrived. They interviewed me multiple times, their questions becoming more pointed. They examined my finances, which were solid with no unusual transactions. They checked my phone records, nothing suspicious. They interviewed our friends and family, all of whom described Clara and me as the perfect couple. Maybe a little distant lately, but nothing alarming. Have you heard the name? Do you know anyone matching the description? One of them asked about Mark. I furrowed my brow, shaking my head. Should I? The detectives exchanged glances but explained they were checking all angles. A truck matching Mark's was reported abandoned by his girlfriend 3 days ago, and he hadn't been seen since. Just a coincidence, they probably thought. People go missing in these mountains all the time. Weeks passed. The media picked up the story. Woman vanishes on romantic cabin getaway. I gave a tearful interview, pleading for information. I posted on social media, sharing photos of Clara, asking anyone with information to come forward. I played the grieving husband perfectly because, in a twisted way, I was grieving. Not for Clara as she was, but for the life and the order she had destroyed. The investigation continued but began to slow. Without a body, without evidence of foul play, without any concrete leads, the case gradually went cold. My leg healed. I returned to work, where colleagues offered sympathetic words and a careful, respectful distance. I was a man who had suffered a great tragedy, and the world gave me space to heal. But I wasn't healing. I was planning. I was waiting. The first phase was complete. Now the real game could begin. Detectives Brady and Cole sat in my living room, the same immaculate, ordered space that Clara had once occupied. The air was heavy with the smell of their cologne and the exhaustion of a man who'd chased a ghost for 6 months. Brady did most of the talking. "We've exhausted every lead," he said, his voice flat. "We've searched thousands of acres. We've interviewed everyone who knew Clara and found nothing to explain her disappearance." They mentioned Mark again, his name a ghost in my quiet apartment. "His truck was never found," Brady said, watching me carefully, looking for a tell, any flicker of recognition. "His disappearance around the same time as Clara's remains unexplained." I met his gaze steadily, my expression a carefully crafted mask of polite confusion. "That's strange," I said, my voice measured. "Do you think they're connected?" Brady didn't answer directly. Instead, he walked through what they knew. No evidence of foul play at the cabin, no signs of struggle, no body, no witnesses. My injured leg was documented. My alibi, while thin, was uncontested. My financial records showed no suspicious activity. My phone data showed no secret communications. Friends and colleagues described me as devoted, if perhaps emotionally reserved. "Off the record," Brady said, leaning forward, his voice a low rumble. "I don't like this. Something feels wrong. But feelings don't hold up in court, and we don't have anything that approaches probable cause," Cole added quietly. "The district attorney won't touch this without a body or concrete evidence linking you to Mrs. Kane's disappearance. As of today, this becomes a cold case." I nodded slowly, letting a wave of relief wash over my face. Not too much, just enough. "So what happens now?" "We keep the file open," Brady said, standing. "Technology improves. Evidence turns up. People talk. If anything changes, we'll be back." He handed me his card. "And if you remember anything at all that might help us understand what happened to your wife, you call me." After they left, I sat in the silence of my apartment. I was free. The investigation was over. I'd gotten away with it not through luck or coincidence, but through meticulous planning and flawless execution. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. The days blended together. I returned fully to work, took on new clients, and maintained my reputation as the brilliant analyst who could predict any outcome. My colleagues stopped offering condolences. The partner who had suggested bereavement leave now praised my resilience. Life moved on, as it always does. But I noticed changes in myself, subtle at first, then increasingly difficult to ignore. My world, once a bastion of perfect order, now felt like a fragile, hollow shell. The precision I had once taken pride in was now a burden, a relentless pursuit of control over a life that was fundamentally broken. I was a man who had solved a problem, but in the process, I had become a part of the problem myself. I was free, but I was also a ghost, haunted by a past that was not just dead, but buried by my own hand. My revenge was complete, but the victory was a poison, leaving me with a cold, calculated emptiness that I knew would never truly heal. My punishment wasn't prison. It was this quiet, suffocating solitude. It's been 3 years since the cabin. My retreat now is a modern structure of glass and steel, located in a different mountain range entirely, a place so far removed from the Cascades that it feels like a different lifetime. I come here once a month, always alone, and sit in the same chair overlooking a pristine valley, thinking, my life, externally, has been one of continued success. I made partner at the firm 2 years ago. My reputation as the analyst who never makes mistakes has only grown. I've expanded my client base and increased my wealth. I date occasionally, appropriate women from professional circles, though nothing serious. When friends suggest it's time to move on, to open myself to new possibilities, I smile and agree, but never follow through. The investigation into Clara's disappearance remains officially open, but practically abandoned. Brady retired last year, and his replacement has shown no interest in cold cases. Mark's girlfriend eventually moved away. His family held a memorial service without a body. The lake keeps its secrets, as I knew it would. Forensic technology has improved, but it's useless without evidence to analyze. I reflect on the practical aspects of my crime, the things I did right, and the few mistakes I've identified in hindsight. I was fortunate that my leg injury was genuine and significant, providing physical evidence to support my timeline. I was fortunate that Clara had been careful enough in her planning that none of our friends suspected the affair. I was fortunate that Mark appeared to be the type of man who might plausibly disappear without his absence raising immediate red flags. But mostly, I created my own fortune through preparation and flawless execution. Yet, as I sit in this expensive cabin surrounded by evidence of my successful life, I confront the question I've been avoiding for 3 years. Was it worth it? I tell myself yes. Clara had violated the fundamental contract of our marriage. She had brought her lover to a place meant for healing our relationship, a level of disrespect and calculation that demanded an absolute response. Mark had knowingly participated in that betrayal. They had made their choices. I had made mine. The world is simpler, cleaner, with them removed from it. But late at night, in the silence of my solitary existence, I acknowledged something I've never voiced aloud. The problem with my response wasn't that it was unjustified. In my mind, it remains a necessary action, but that it was too quick. If I had that day again, I think I would have paused. Not to spare them, I'm long past that kind of sentiment, but to understand first. To ask questions, to unravel the full scope of Clara's betrayal before acting. The impulsiveness of my rage, so uncharacteristic for a man who prides himself on control, meant I acted without complete information. I solved the problem efficiently, but efficiency isn't the same as completeness. This, I decide, is the lesson. Even justified actions benefit from patience and thorough analysis. I stand, pour myself a drink, and watch the sun set over the valley. Tomorrow I'll return to the city, to my ordered life, to the persona I maintain flawlessly. No one knows what I did. No one will ever know. I have achieved the perfect crime. The cost is simply that I can never, not even to myself in the darkest hours, admit that it might also have been a perfect mistake. I raise my glass to the empty room. To order, I say quietly, and the price of maintaining it. The cabin offers no response. I expect none. I finish my drink, set the glass down precisely in the center of the table, and begin preparing for sleep. In the morning, I'll lock up the cabin and drive back to civilization, leaving this version of myself, the one who thinks too much about a day 3 years past, behind in the mountains where it belongs. Until next month, when the thoughts grow too loud again, and I return to sit in the same chair and think the same thoughts and arrive at the same conclusion. It was necessary, it was justified, and I would do it again. Just slower, with more information, with perfect control, always with control. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.